Hello and welcome to Connected with Latham, where we discuss ideas, legal developments and business trends shaping the global economy. I'm Tom Evans, a private equity M&A partner in Latham & Watkins' London office. In this episode, we discuss beauty deals in the private equity space, specifically regarding the so-called lipstick effect, which describes how consumer demand for relatively affordable luxuries, such as lipstick, continues or even increases during challenging economic times. I'm joined today by a fellow partner from the London office, Deborah Kirk, who specialises in intellectual property and IT transactions. Thank you for joining, Debs.
No worries, Tom. Great to be involved.
Brilliant. So keen to talk about the piece that you co-authored in Latham & Watkins PE Views titled The Lipstick Effect, Kylie Jenner and New Technologies Making Beauty Deals Increasingly Attractive for Private Equity. Why are we talking about lipstick and private equity in the same phrase?
So, Tom, here the reference to lipstick is really representative of the broader beauty industry, which has been the subject of some pretty chunky deals and investments recently. So, to take one, last November, Coty announced it would buy a controlling stake of 51% in Kylie Beauty, and that was a $600 million stake, with the other 49% being retained by Kylie Jenner. L'Oreal acquired IT Cosmetics, which is a top-selling prestige makeup and skincare brand from TSG Consumer Partners. That was the $1.2 billion deal. So big numbers here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really interesting time for the industry, particularly in lockdown, oddly.
It's booming in lockdown. We may not need makeup for IRL meetings at the moment, Tom, but we still got to look good on those Zoom calls and on our Instagram page. So yeah, in lockdown, it is one of the golden industries that has done really well.
For people who aren't in tech, what does IRL mean, Debs?
In real life, Tom, you got to get down with the cool kids in their lingo.
Got it.
So yeah, it's booming. And also I see the beauty industry as having a real kind of ally in a way with diversity. There are now more and more products out there designed for all skin tones, all hair types, and makeup products designed for male skins. And so it's got a very interesting space. And having flippantly mentioned people's desire to look good on Instagram, there are now products specifically designed to make you look good in photos, the kind of products that previously would have been reserved for the likes of makeup artists. So social and technological change has, created a lot of room here for innovation and imagination in the industry. And with that backdrop, I guess it's not surprising to see PE enthusiasm in this space. If you look at the numbers in 2019, PE buyers accounted for 47% of all beauty M&A.
Wow.
So yeah, it's not just the trade buyers, it's the PE houses as well, seeing great returns. If you look at the L'Occitane purchase of Elemi from Steiner Leisure, that's a portfolio company of El Catterton. That was, again, a $900 million cash deal. So we always knew PE was beautiful, Tom, and now they're investing in it.
Oh man, Debs, that is so cheesy. Your article pointed out, nevertheless, that from a legal perspective, the assets of a beauty business are actually pretty fickle. Brand, goodwill, and ingredients formulae really are what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. When you boil it down, it's not like these businesses have a swathe of legal protections for their IP, perhaps surprisingly. I mean, a lot of these formulae, frankly, aren't patentable. But what you do have is a brand and associated goodwill that's generated through, the likes of social media channels. And that's jealously guarded, and is where our diligence is focused as a result to, stress test this and ask whether it will stand up to changing tastes, changing faces, and the good old test of time.
And so when these do come across your desk, Debs, what specifically are you looking for when you're carrying out the diligence?
So first, there's the obvious brand, or I should say trademark protections. Where is that registered? Are there gaps? Are there third-party objections? And from a PE investment perspective, is there space in the portfolio for growth? Second, there's the manufacturing agreements, which is where you can get some IP protection in that exclusivity arrangements, for example, will prevent those manufacturers from supplying the same product elsewhere. And then I guess finally, the point we made in our article is that the lifestyle and image that's represented by these brands is now, really key. And in some cases, that's heavily reliant on a particular celebrity's involvement. And where that's the case, we need to think behind the brand and look at how we can secure that involvement and commitment from the individual. It's worth thinking, does the brand have a future without them, and what would that look like? And from a valuation perspective, separating the goodwill associated with the likes of Kylie Jenner in respect of her beauty business versus her other endeavors, that could also be a challenge.
Interesting, because we're looking at a long period of time potentially with those relationships. When you think about the typical private equity investment horizon of 4 to 7 years, how do you deal with those relationship issues in the longer term, Debs?
It's a really tricky one where not only the marketing, but the brand itself is centered around the individual, as is the case with Kylie Jenner. And in many ways, having the ability to replace the face is helpful as, new celebrities become the new desired brand ambassadors. But if the brand itself is based on the name, there's a question behind longevity, because without that individual, what will happen? And there's a question around the ability to prevent competition by that individual in the long term if they sell their stake.
That's really interesting, Debs. A final point I wanted to ask about was the increasing customization of beauty products, a point that you've made a couple of times earlier in this conversation. What's your vibe on data privacy compliance by growth brands, and how likely it is that authorities will come knocking?
Yeah, it's a great point as the line between, beauty and med starts to blur, and consumers are being offered much more tailored beauty solutions. And I think it's really about ensuring that the right processes are in place to ensure good policy around anonymization, data deletion, correct treatment of any sensitive data which could likely arise here. And it's important that those things are not only documented, but that they're executed and practiced across the organization and regularly revisited and updated globally, giving this as an area moving at eye-watering speed in a number of jurisdictions. And we're seeing the data protection authorities now really using the powers that they've been given to impose significant fines.
Debs, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today about consumer demand for beauty products. Really appreciate it.
No worries, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode in our Connected with Latham podcast series. You can subscribe and listen to new and archived episodes of Latham's podcasts on lw.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. If you'd like more information about the topics in this podcast, please email us from the links located in the show description. We hope you'll join us again next time.
This podcast is provided as a service of Latham & Watkins LLP. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and Latham & Watkins LLP, and you should not send confidential information to Latham & Watkins LLP. While we make every effort to assure that the content of this podcast is accurate, comprehensive, and current, we do not warrant or guarantee any of those things. And you may not rely on this podcast as a substitute for legal research and/or consulting a qualified attorney. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for engaging a lawyer to advise you on your individual needs. Should you require legal advice on the issues covered in this podcast, please consult a qualified attorney. Under New York's Code of Professional Responsibility, portions of this communication contain attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Results depend upon a variety of factors unique to each representation. Please direct all inquiries regarding the conduct of Latham & Watkins attorneys under the New York's disciplinary rules to Latham & Watkins LLP, 885 3rd Avenue, New York, New York, 10022-4834. Phone number 1-212-906-1200.